All right, I guess we don't have a lot of opportunities to get different types of oil pan side by side next to one another to compare. So let's make a couple of observations and just see what we can work out. So over here is the N54 oil pan off my 335, and that over there is an N52, probably a B25, B23, whatever oil pan. So I think this is off E60, 523s, 525s, that kind of car. And this is on the E92s and E90s, the turbocharged car. So what's the difference, and why were we actually comparing it? Well, the main reason for wanting to have a look at maybe substituting that pan from the E60 and the N52 onto the race car is that it has this additional port on it, which actually comes standard with a plastic plug in there, plastic screw-in plug, and the idea was that that we could make use of that for a dipstick. And in fact, we had already sourced a dipstick, which would have worked absolutely beautifully. So this dipstick, it's a plastic tube, and you buy the two components separately, the dipstick and the tube itself. And I think they're from a Jetta 4 or something like that. And this here is the plug that was in there. It's a plastic plug with an O-ring on it, nice hex on the end. And it has a 13mm hole in the end, which just happens to be incredibly close to the diameter of the stalk over here. So by drilling it through the hex, and then polishing up this the stalk a little bit, putting the plug in the oven and the tube in the freezer, nice interference fit, got it dragged in there, and basically this would install in there quite nicely, screw in, and you'd have a dipstick and not have to rely on these electronic dipsticks. So why can't we swap it over? Well, here's the reason. There is actually a difference on these oil pans, and it's pretty much got to do with where the power steering pump is mounted. So on the N54, power steering pump is mounted on a bracket and mounted on 3 points on the sump itself. So bolt here, and then around this side, another bolt over there. And the N52 version doesn't have any of those bolt locations. And you can actually see from the inside here, you've actually got an additional part of the casting which allows the bolt to be threaded in there. There's no such thing on this side. So it's a bit of a non-starter, unless of course in the racing car we decide to move away from power steering, or maybe move to electric power steering, or possibly even find a way to mount the power steering pump in the same way that it is on the N52. But I do suspect that that's going to be a waste of time, because I'm sure there was a reason that they moved from the N52 configuration to this as they developed the N54, and it's probably a packaging issue, because there's a lot more going on with the N54. So with that said, are there any other differences? So measuring the depth of the pan, the vertical depth from the bottom of the pan up into the edge here, pretty much identical. If anything, the N54 pan may be a millimeter deeper, so nothing material. But there are a couple of little differences on the casting, which is worth noting. So firstly, on the N52, there's these two pretty long ribs, and they're hollow from the underside, so they're not structural. I suspect they're there just to guide the flow of oil. I suspect back down into the deep part of the sump. In the case of the N54, the top one is shorter, and the bottom one is a lot shorter, almost non-existent, and there's a separate depression over here which is not existing on the N52. So these are probably just to accommodate a slightly different configuration of the windage tray and the pump setup, etc. Make sure that things don't foul. It does look like it's a common oil quality and oil level sensor, but that you'll be able to verify very quickly on real OEM. Another thing that I found interesting is when I started cleaning up this oil pan, which was scary dirty, and I was starting to see funny little dents and divots, and I thought, well, has this engine seen some kind of catastrophic blowout that's knocked a bunch of dents into the inside of this aluminium pan, which of course, being a cast aluminium pan, is unlikely in and of itself. But interesting to note that those exact same peculiar little dents and divots exist on the N54 pan. So they obviously are there for a reason. Goodness knows what. I mean, they're absolutely tiny. I can't imagine how little dents like this can provide for any kind of clearance or anything. But yeah, there you have them. The rest of the profile, the kind of profile over here on both looks very similar. Corner profile is very similar, other than the fact that there are some profile changes simply because they've had to put the location for the bolt holes in there. But yeah, by and large, I think they're materially identical or similar in size and capacity, but obviously just with a couple of material and functional changes from the one to the other, making them not really practical to swap over. Another fun fact is I decided to check what the capacity of the pan is in this form. So this is exactly how the pan would sit in the car, with the base completely flat and level, and then oil would fill up, and effectively this sensor only measures oil up until, well, somewhere close to the top. Obviously it can't measure anywhere above that. So how much oil do we actually get into these things? So the oil refill on both N54 and N52, I believe, is 6.5 liters. So I started off with a jug of 5 liters of water and dumped it in here, and actually that was pretty much the end of the exercise, because the water came to within 4 or 5 mils of this edge over here. It actually did cover this section in a very thin film or thin layer of water, but this section was full, and I had checked this for level. So anything more than 5 liters is actually going to flood your sealing joint, which I found surprising. I don't know why, but I'd always assumed that the oil level would be below the sealing joint, and also at that point it is above the oil level sensor. So how the hell does it work then? So here's the thing. Did some reading up on the oil level sensor, and very interestingly, the sensor doesn't measure in real time, and just, you can't just go switch on and have a look at what the sensor's telling you. It won't report on the dash the actual real-time information. It will refresh once in every 20 minutes, and it will only do that refreshment and give you a new datum point if the car has been running, that the oil is at operating temperature, and that certain lateral and transverse acceleration values have been achieved, so it knows that the oil is sloshed around adequately, and it then measures all of that stuff and comes up with a value to tell you whether you've got enough oil in your pan. So using this as a static measurement is quite tricky. What I did do at the track, which I presume was working. So here's the thing. 6.5 liters capacity that's supposed to go into these motors. Obviously, in my car, I've got dual oil coolers, so that's going to add a little bit more, but they're full. So when we do an oil change, we don't lose that oil or that capacity. But I took out of my engine 10 liters of oil. Now, 2 of those liters would have been from the AccuSump. So normally the way, or what I did at the last 2 events, was start the car, get the oil pressure up by elevating the revs, get it up to a point where it would comfortably overcome the back pressure in the AccuSump, thereby filling the AccuSump. I would then close the AccuSump down, locking about 2 liters of oil in there, and then I would proceed by holding the RPM at 1,000 to then measure using one of the BMW diagnostic tools. As it happens in this case, Pro Tool is pretty convenient because it's cell phone based, and then literally to gradually and incrementally increase the amount of oil to the maximum that this will measure, which is 74.4 millimeters. And once you reach that point, there's no point in kind of adding anything more and trying to measure it, so I just added an additional 300 mils. And with that exercise, all in all, I pretty much got 10 liters into the car, as I say, excluding the capacity that's in the oil coolers and excluding the bit that's in the oil filter housing, because I haven't cracked that open and replaced the oil filter. So that's a buck ton of oil. So if you take the additional bits and pieces, there's probably another liter comfortably So we probably have a total filled capacity in the car at any point in time of about 11 liters, which should help with thermal management. There's a lot more oil to move around and to absorb energy, but we're obviously still running pretty darn hot. But yeah, that's kind of the learning, and so far we still don't have our oil issues resolved. So the idea now is to effectively fit a baffle into the N54. So basically fabricated something up. Maybe just to talk to that while boring everybody to tears. Hopefully, yeah, it's not quite as perfectly snug as it was in the other tray. I actually made it to suit that one. But this is the compartment where the pickup resides, and so we try and create a nice sealed enclosure here. We've got 2 trapdoors that allows any additional oil that drains into this section over here to push back through the trapdoors. The trapdoors are have been set up in such a way that they cannot open by more than 30 degrees. So you'll see the little hinge wire bent over there. So both of these can only open to 30 degrees. And the reason for that, I'm told, I didn't invent this, the reason for that is to prevent the doors opening too wide, because then it takes them that much longer to slam shut, and obviously that is not what you want. The other thought that I actually had, though, is particularly in this setup where you've got 2 right next to one another, is you don't want them to open up to the point where they may actually jam up against one another, or heaven forbid even flip up completely and be stuck open in the fully open condition. But I don't think that's possible. So yeah, relatively straightforward there to try and create that, and then fashioned up this. This still has to have the pickup hole cut out of it, and I'm only able to do that now that I've got the sump off, so I can actually measure up properly. This is quite a tricky fit, but effectively I'll probably end up pulling out the oil level sensor, but this will fit on here. So these holes, that one there is just for the oil level sensor. This was for the the dipstick, which is no longer going to be used. I'll probably close that up somehow, and then these guys here are drain holes. And what I decided to do is actually put a couple of dimple dies on here to give it a little bit of a dimple. I don't know, probably won't do anything, but looks a little bit sexier than just a nasty cut hole. So yeah, let's see how it goes. All of this is pretty much within my capabilities to fashion and fabricate this kind of thing. What is not within my capabilities is to TIG weld this in any decent fashion together. So this is going to be a bit of a scary endeavor. Let's hope I get a half decent result. If I don't make a complete cock up of it, I'll maybe take a video or show the end result. If you don't see anything, it means it was as ugly or even uglier than I had feared, and I'm not willing to embarrass myself by showing it. So yeah, I hope that video is of interest to the guys, particularly running N54s. By the way, one last comment is a pretty widely held narrative that N54s don't struggle with oil surge. And the reason for that, guys, is you don't know, because the N54 doesn't have an oil pressure sensor. It's got an oil pressure switch, and so the only time you would be alerted to any kind of oil surge issues is if your oil light came on, and that by the time that happens, everything is way too late. So I'm running MHD, and I'm running the Nexus Motorsport N55 oil pressure sensor mod. So I do log and monitor oil pressures, and yeah, trust me, this motor very much suffers from oil surge. So I'm not even confident that the baffling is going to work. If it doesn't, pretty much fresh out of options. So baffles plus overfilling plus AccuSump. If that doesn't solve it, then I'm afraid it is dry sump. Hoping not to go there, because I'm trying to avoid throwing all the checkbook at the car, but let's see how it goes. All right, thanks for watching. Cheers.